dodge this.
One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is January 8th, 2015. Time's already flying by. It's the new year. It's 2015. It's already going into the second week of January. Anyway, welcome back to another live edition. Tonight I have a very special broadcast planned, very interesting topic. I have a special in-studio guest, you could say, sitting in another section of the DTRH studios. He'll be joining me in a few short minutes. My good friend, author Liam Scheff. We're going to be discussing the topic of a new book he is writing, and we'll inevitably probably end up touching on his other book. But he's currently working on a new book about relationships, sex, marriage, and that's the focus. He's retooled his broadcast, as it were, and that's the main focus of his broadcast now. And it's an interesting path that has led him there through his own personal journey, which I'll let him get into that. I won't spoil, Liam's thing. So we had a conversation yesterday. Liam and I, we were in my car. I was down in Miami, and I happened to be driving back to where I was, and I picked him up on the way. And we had a very interesting intellectual conversation about love, religion, relationships, marriage, sex, the tribal nature of human beings in general, culture, society, how society is molded and how things have been molded for society when it comes to marriage, relationships, and sex, and people's feelings towards them. So it's going to be an interesting broadcast. I'm really looking forward to it. Very interesting perspective that I have on this subject now, especially because of what I've gone through in the past 3 months. It makes you reevaluate a lot of stuff, what I went through, and the experience that I had losing my wife. And because of that, I because of that experience, I can't explain it other than I just have this. I don't want to say I'm on a higher level because that sounds very arrogant. It's just I'm on a different. I have a different vantage point, we'll say, of the entire picture now. I can see things, I guess, from a different angle, maybe with a different filter. And some of the points, in fact, almost, I would say probably almost every single thing, if not, everything, I would have to agree with the points that Liam is going to make tonight. I might have a separate, a little bit tweaked view of it here or there, but my perspective change has been very interesting over the past few months. You start to look at life differently. You start to realize a lot of the small, subtle things that we argue every day about with each other aren't even really, it's not even about each other. It's societal programming that's instilled into us generationally over the years, from parent to child. And it keeps going down through the generations of family and stuff. There's just so much to it. Anyway, I'm going to bring Liam on. So give me 2 seconds here. Let me add him to the conversation. And I'm going to have him plug his other book, his older book as well. But I really, really want to focus on this topic, the topic of relationships, love, marriage. That's the topic of Liam's up-and-coming work, as I said. And trust me, after you hear what he has to say tonight, I think that you'll at least sit down and look at things and maybe understand why society is so messed up. And maybe, I'm not saying this is the only answer to things, but maybe this is one of those answers that everybody's looking for. Maybe this is a way to, and not for everybody, but maybe it's a way to fix it for some people. I don't know. It seems to work. Anyway, let's get into it. My good friend, author, comedian, Mr. Liam Scheff. Liam, welcome back, brother.
Hello.
I started off the broadcast talking about, just giving like a brief overview of what we were going to talk about tonight. And I mentioned that you and I had a very intellectually
was it that Marky Mark's career must have started with a depraved act of...
that's not that conversation. But yes, that one's true too. That goes back to what we were just talking about with Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
When we were talking about relationships and marriage and love and sex and religion yesterday in general, we started off with one simple topic, relationships and marriage, and it ended being this like 8-hour conversation we had, which was just super intense with it was really very good conversation, and we both thought that the listeners would benefit from hearing some of it. Plus, it's the very content that you're writing a new book about, correct?
Right. I'm rounding the curve, finishing up the book. It's going to be a short book because it was funny that you said this the other day. It's a solution-oriented book. If I went to diagram the problem, I could write an encyclopedia. But it's a solution-oriented book, and I've come to this conclusion. As I've dealt with the autism community, men and women whose children have been, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers whose children have been damaged, as I've dealt with the fake HIV testing scam that goes on all over the world, as I've dealt with whatever it is that people get involved in that starts to suck the life out of them, whether it's 9/11 Truth or Newtown, Connecticut stuff, everybody needs love, everybody needs affection, and everybody needs support. I've seen this in the autism community almost more, and I know it's a strange segue, but I've seen it in the autism community because mothers whose children are destroyed by the vaccine cartel through injections are just become very isolated, and they are pushed around by doctors, and then they resent it, and then they try to fight, and they learn, they're told that they're stupid. The husbands are clinging on for dear life, not sure what's happening. The mothers become eventually, or sometimes the fathers, quite assured by doing the reading that the child has been damaged by vaccines, and they feel very alone. Then they form a kind of an island, and nobody understands them. So I've seen couples becoming more and more isolated in a struggle. Now, I grew up, as I think you did, I think, in a divorced family. My parents' divorce, I'll say, was maybe in the Guinness Book of World Records for the bloodiest divorce, 1973-4, pointlessly, needlessly. There was no money at stake, not really. There was no business. My father went crazy. His second wife was crazy. My mother's very difficult. I've watched people suicide relationships. I've seen people who were in decent relationships fall in love with somebody else and feel that even though the first relationship was okay, they had to make an attempt to destroy it so that they could honor the second relationship. I've seen people have lovers for years who they really cared about, but always treat them sort of like dirt because they couldn't somehow find room for them because they had to honor their previous engagement. And all of it caused me to think my whole life long about what was wrong with our system. And I'll pause.
Well, we do have something wrong with our current system. I think that I don't, and I mentioned this yesterday. Like when it comes to marriage, we'll I guess we could start there. Like marriage itself, I think if someone's willing to do it, if someone's willing to, and it has to. There's many variables, and we'll get into this. But if someone's willing to, love someone and be there for someone and be that best friend to them. I'm not talking about like take sex aside for a second. Just look at it like being there as that person's mate, that person's best friend, that person's whatever, their soulmate or whatever. That concept of being there for someone, that kind of relationship with someone, that can totally exist. But I think that the institution, the way we have marriage now, like the Victorian system that it's set up in and everything else, and the way we like we got into yesterday and we'll get into tonight, I think that generally does not work. Sometimes I guess it could work on maybe an individual basis, but as an umbrella basis, like telling everybody that's how their relationship has to be, and if it's not, you're doomed to hell and you're a bad person and that you can't love each other and you shouldn't be loved and you should be ashamed of yourself. All of that is bunk. I think and a lot of that comes from religion. It comes from that guilt, like the old school Catholic guilt, right? Oh, if you think about sex, you're a bad person. If you can only have sex if you're married. If you have sex other than in your marriage, you're going to burn in hell. I mean, everything is always guilt, burn in hell, bad. And you put it best where all of that comes from. You really got into detail how all of that actually goes back to tribalism, and it's not as simple as one would think. So, thoughts?
The book is going to be about this topic. The disaster that we're put into is the notion that once we love somebody, we only can love them, really. Not really, we can only love them, and we own their genitals and they own ours. Very straightforwardly, marriage is not the meeting of two minds. It is not the meeting of two hearts. It is considered legalistically the meeting of two pairs of genitals, or sorry, why do we call them pairs? The meeting of a pair of genitals, or we do call them genitals. They're plural. My genital? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just had to think about this. How is your genital?
Well, I guess a pair would indicate like a pair of socks. Like one yours is one half of the pair, and hers would be the other.
No, but it's not that way because I have two, and she's supposed to have two. She has two egg producers, and I have two swimmer. Okay, anyway, whatever. Everybody's tired of this conversation. Anyway, it goes like this. Once you fall in love with somebody, you're a slave your whole childhood. You have to do what your parents say. Your idiot teachers, the Boy Scout masters, whatever you're into. You have to wait and wait and wait to get free, and then finally you get free and you fall in love with somebody and you feel that your whole world lights up and you say, "Okay, great, I'm in love now. Great, I'm in love with you. I really like you too. I like you more than I've ever liked anybody. Oh, great, kiss me. Okay, oh, it feels so good to kiss. Oh, let's kiss more. Okay, do you want to do the other thing? Well, just a tip. Well, okay, we're all the way in now." Oh, it feels so good. It's so great. It's so great. Well, I really love you and you really love me. So never do that with anybody else again. What? No. You love me, right? Well, you can never do that with anybody else again. I know it was great. I know you waited your whole life to be free, but you can never do that with anybody else again. I own you. I own your genitals, at least. You can think about whatever you want, but just don't let me know. And you own my genitals, so if that's a consolation, now we have to spy on each other in the house that we own together to make sure that nobody's too attracted to anybody else. And if for any reason we don't get along perfectly, we're failures. But we just won't tell anybody about it, and we'll watch Mad Men and Sopranos and Bachelorette and Slut Island and whatever's on Fox to vent our normal sexual interests. And that's what we do. And I'm tired of it. It's so there's my setup, right? That's where we live.
Well said about the Bachelor and what would you call it? Slut Island?
Slut Island, Whore Island,
No, you're right. Look, this country is very sexually repressed, and I can say that. I've hung out in the Netherlands. I spent plenty of time over there, and I'm not saying everything is perfect in other countries, and America sucks and blah blah blah. But this country is very sexually repressed. I mean, it was founded by a bunch of people that were so uptight that the Europeans kicked them out. The British were like, "Wow, you people are way uptight." it's a joke. Ha ha ha. Anyway, the point is, this country as a whole is very, even though we say we're the land of the free and we're so open and stuff, we're not really that open. And I'm not trying to bash anybody's sexual beliefs or sexual preferences or religious beliefs.
I'm about to.
Well, the religious beliefs part you will. But like, I think that this country, in order to heal itself from the trauma it's been through, I think they need to. I think even if they don't walk away and it doesn't change their perspective, I think people at least have to have an honest look and an honest conversation with themselves about how they really feel and maybe why they, if they fight with their partner or whatnot, why they fight and what they fight about, or if they. If they feel sexually repressed, why they feel repressed, how do they feel? Because this country has a huge problem with that, it's institutionalized. Go on.
I don't think that people know that they're sexually repressed because we're a anorexic bulimic culture. We shove TNA in your face all the time. At the grocery store, when you check out, you see who's screwing who's cheating, a word I don't really understand, on who. In other words, they're having extracurricular affection or sex, supposedly. It's always supposedly. And you as you buy your Twinkies and your Ho-Hos and your GMO corn, you're supposed to get off in the line. In what the Germans call Schadenfreude, your happiness at their misery, at the expense of their misery, and it's because you're not happy. It's because we are not supposed to be happy. We walk around going, wait a second, I fell in love with somebody for a moment, and then suddenly we owned each other's genitals. Suddenly we weren't allowed to be expressive with each other and go, well, maybe we both want to share some genitals once in a while, or maybe my girlfriend likes girls sometimes, or maybe my boyfriend likes boys sometimes, or maybe my boyfriend likes two girls sometimes, or maybe whatever. Because this is actually perfectly normal. People consider this rather extravagant sexual behavior, but I can tell you that it's not. I've been interviewing and reading and interviewing and talking with so many people. I can't tell you how many women are a little bit bisexual. I've met women who didn't think they were even slightly bisexual, who eventually kissed a girl and said, that was really nice. And I'm like, yay! Yay, it was really nice. Good for you. And that opens things up a little for them not to think that the center of their relationship is genital ownership. I mean, on what planet do we think that the center of our world is genital ownership? Think about it. Everybody's arguing. Oh, well, no. It's more than that. You fall in love and you have oh, shut up. Oh, we have a spiritual development that grows together through our genitals. Shut up. Let me ask you a question, Popeye. You were married to a long time. You lost your spouse in a similar way that I did, to the powers that be, in a very cruel act. They call it death. I have trouble saying it because once you experience it, you don't really believe. It's difficult to believe. Once you experience death, it's hard to call it death anymore, right? Do you know what I mean? Once you experience a loss like that, you just don't think of death being the same way because the person's always with you and they're still with you and all that kind of stuff. But you've been in a relationship for a long time. Now, let me ask you, did you, during the course of your life, ever experience anything that would make you believe that people were much more sexual, much more sexually curious, much freer sexually than we'd be led to believe by any particular episode of The Facts of Life or Dora the Explorer or, I don't know what's on TV right now, Modern Family? And I pause for your answer.
Yeah, I mean, the first 5 minutes I lived in South Beach. If you've ever been to South Beach, it's like LA and New York City and Miami all rolled into this little tiny piece of land off the mainland. And I mean, when I worked at the tattoo shop there, I mean, I saw some of the most debaucherous stuff. I might have even taken part in some of the debauchery.
Did you say saw?
Supposedly. Supposedly. Allegedly. How do they say that? Allegedly.
Well, let me hear what some things that you might have allegedly seen, if you can put your finger on it.
Okay, well, like the tattoo shop I worked at, I mean, it was insanity. Like, people would come in from the Midwest, right? And they would say, I would always ask them, so is this culture shock to you? And like people from Kansas would be like, I've never seen this before. I might have seen hookers or something on the street. And that might have been mind blowing to them. Whereas like I would walk into work and sometimes we had a lot of strippers that would come in and get pierced or tattooed and stuff. And I would come into work and there'd be like 3 or 4 strippers waiting for me for the piercer to come in. And cause I came in at 2:00 and I would walk in and like one day I walked in and there were 2 girls. The shop was old school. And there were 2 girls swinging around support poles in the shop. Like they were in their lingerie, just swinging around. And I walked in and I looked at the tattoo guys and I was like, really? Like I looked at the artist, I was like, what is this, a treat? What's going on here? And they were like, oh, they're waiting for you. It was very free, open, it was like a very liberating type of attitude when it came to sex. And then not that I hadn't been exposed to that, but it was just a very different attitude. And then you get to hang out with people and just not even experiencing things, just talking to them or going to parties and seeing things, maybe being in a situation, you're at a party where there's something going on there and it's weird. Like maybe, you go hang out and you're chilling out with a chick and they're like, oh, let me tell you about a fetish party or something like that, right? If you're in an area where people are doing stuff and they're more open-minded, you're going to see more things. You're going to not even experience it yourself, but be exposed to that experience. It's going to open your mind a little bit because you're going to see that, hell doesn't open up and demons don't suck people into the center of the earth and all this other stuff. So I've seen a ton of debauchery, but I have to cut us off because the break is sneaking up. When we come back, I can pick up with a few more examples if you'd like. But I want to pause this because I don't want to train wreck it. So everybody stay right there. 3 short minutes. We'll be back. All right, we are back. I've thrown my little nuisance troll cat out of the side of the house. So annoying. I swear to God, cats have no concept of personal space whatsoever. And he's a bossy 16-year-old male cat who won't shut up. I had to throw him out of here and throw him out of the section of the studio where poor Liam is sitting. He was attacking both sections of the studio trying to get in. Oy. Thank you, cat, for trying to train wreck the first quarter of the show. Little snot. Anyway, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I want to get back into it. So, Liam, you asked me going into break if I'd seen any debauchery in my life that would think, when I was younger, if I would think that that would make me change my outlook on sex. But, of course you see things in porno mags and stuff, but like even though I grew up in Jersey right outside New York City, it's still, you don't experience, you're not really going to experience the world until you go out and experience it, right? So, like, the first time I'd ever seen South Beach, it was even before I ever lived down there or worked down there, it was when I was stationed in the military, and I had seen crazy stuff. But when I worked down there, and lived down there, and I was a local, it was probably when I saw the most debauchery. I know a guy that used to hook up with chicks at the tattoo shop like it was going out of style. Him and another guy had a competition to see who could, how can I put this, because I'm trying to be family friendly as best I can, how many could get chicks naked and fool around with them in the tattoo shop, each respectively, like, because there were 2 different shops. And these guys, you'd be surprised how very easy and very into doing certain things people are.
Well, let's be specific. So you worked at some tattoo shops, and you knew the regular. I worked at a couple restaurants. I worked at some bookstores. I worked at some cafes. I can tell you that everywhere I worked, sex was in the air. It wasn't because of me. Sex was just
everywhere.
In any group of people.
Everywhere, if there's a group of men and women working together or whatever in an area together, somebody is having sex with somebody else.
Yeah, and usually usually they're double ups. But what you told me about the tattoo shop culture was interesting in that because women are coming in to get their privates sometimes pierced, the privates are already, their genitals, their vaginas are already on display. And apparently some of the guys found it relatively easy to convince them to let them try to give them an orgasm with their hands.
Yes.
So this is something that happens in tattoo shops.
Well, it's and you know what? It's not that I'm not trying to give tattoo shops like a bad name or anything like that, but
I think we're giving tattoo shops a great name. Women can go get orgasms in tattoo shops.
Well, I'm sure not every tattoo shop has done it, but yes, debauchery does happen like that. And anybody that says, look, everybody, this is from my viewpoint, and I've seen many people lie about sex and say they don't have it, they don't like it, sex is icky, it's scary, it's against their religion, whatever. Most of those people are lying. If they tell you they don't have sex in one way, shape, or form, whether it's sex with their wife, sex with a girlfriend, masturbation, whatever, they're lying to you, okay? It's unnatural, it's unhuman, it's a primal, natural, mammalian urge. Everything on this planet, every animal on this planet, mammals, fish, anything I could think of uses sex to procreate in one way, shape, or form.
Right, but we're a little bit different. We're like bonobos, chimps, and people say we're not animals. Actually, we're a little bit different because we actually have sex for pleasure, like bonobos and chimpanzees. Very few animals have sex for pleasure the way humans and bonobos chimps do. You can read Sex at Dawn by Chris Ryan and Casilda Jathan. They talk about that. I'll talk about that a little bit in my book. But the reality is that we're a much more sexual species. We're socially sexual, which is what you're describing. The finger bang club of tattoo parlors in South Beach, or probably in parts of California where I used to live, I can't tell you how many times women like sex, men like sex. The ideas that we've been filled with are that women don't like sex, and this is a joke. Women love sex. They love to be sexual. They just want to feel, number one, that they understand the rules. Are they getting into it where they're going to have to pretend to be in a relationship? Or is this a freebie? Is this a free pass? Is this a guy who simply likes them, or a girl who simply likes them and wants to have a good time and isn't going to be in that I own your genitals place? Oh, I own your genitals. I kissed you. I own your genitals. Oh, you kissed somebody else. You cheated. I own your mouth too. Oh, I didn't like the way you looked at that person. You cheated. Oh, we're in trouble now. Let me ask you something. If you were trying to control the human population, and you looked at this human population, and for about 300,000 years we wandered about as foragers, and there was very little sexual jealousy. There was no marriage. There was no church. There was no lifetime marriage. There was nothing in the way of possessions. We moved seasonally. We moved from week to week, month to month. We were foragers. We gathered food very low on the food chain. We ate a lot of grasshoppers, frogs, a lot of roots, tubers, low-hanging fruit, nuts, seeds, etc. Occasional hunting, but very little compared to what we think. It's not like hunting mastodons. We were this very different species than we imagine. We were a rather communal, egalitarian, goddess-worshipping, phallic-worshipping species. Why wouldn't we be? This is the things that made life work and gave us the greatest pleasure. Why wouldn't we be? So this is what we come from. Now, 10,000 years ago, we got into a little trap. We started growing food in one place. We got very fussy. We had to work very hard. We had to collect the food. Then the men felt like they had to know who their children were because they had to pass on all this crap that they had accrued through their lives to their male sons. Women became possessions of men. Men became possessions essentially of the king or the landowner. The taxes went uphill, and crap flows downhill. Women and children were objects. Male children would grow up to do their father's bidding. Well, this isn't the way that we grew up as a species. We had 250 or so thousand years, as far as anybody can tell, of being a kind of communal, easygoing, foraging species. And we have 10,000 years, which is 4 or 5% of that, as a rather uptight land-owning species, property-owning species, and women-managing species. It was in that period of switching to agriculture that we invented marriage. And marriage was the binding of two plots of land in the name of two people. The woman's family and the man's family would then be bound, and that land and property would be bound. And that was it. There was no notion of romance. There was no notion of Valentine's Day. There was no notion of flowers in February. There was no notion of honeymoons. None of that existed because this was a business deal, purely business. People fell in love all the time, and they had to marry somebody else. That was very normal.
The whole idea of husband, actually, you blew my mind when you told me where the word, because I think roots of words we really need to be looked at again. The origins of words that we use on a daily basis need to be looked at again. That blew my mind when you told me what the word husband actually means.
Yeah, it means Christopher Walken, which a lot of people don't realize. That Christopher Walken is a time traveler who invented the modern age. Husband, the house binder, the house owner, the one who owns the house, period. Who's your housebond?
So he's like the landowner, that's all he is.
He's the guy who owns the building you live in.
And then if you think about it that way, okay, so he's the owner of the house, that means that then, well, why is he in charge of the wife and the kids? Because they're looked at as property, like you said, like cattle almost.
Yeah, in fact, the word capital, we're capitalists, and if you decapitate somebody, you take their capita off, their head. Capita comes from counting cattle. We're capitalists. We all deal in this thing that we drive across the land, we milk, we make breed, we take their young away from them, and then we slaughter all of them. We come from a very brutal, our ethos, our marriage ethos comes from something called Leviticus. And Leviticus comes from something called the Torah, which is in some circles called the Old Testament, although I beg to differ. This Christianity is a very is sort of a more opportunistic form of Judaism, and that's the truth. And I'll explain what I mean. But the old Hebrew, the old Near Eastern ancient Hebrew tribe that was somewhere in the 700s to 800s BC, wandering back from a kind of servitude in Iraq, aka Babylon, came up with a bunch of stories, most of them borrowed, absolutely stolen from Babylonian myth, like the flood and the creation, and the Code of Hammurabi became the Leviticus and the Ten Commandments. All of these stories made it in to their writings, and those writings were slowly accumulated over a very few hundred years. And those were rewritten and rewritten and rewritten by hand. Then that's somehow that thing from 700 or so BC of an ancient herding tribe that didn't value the rights of women to exist. Women were property of men. Men were servants of God, aka the landowner. And if a man lay with a man, if a man was sexual with a man, he should be killed. If a woman lay with a man not approved of by the people who married her to somebody else, she should be killed. She should be stoned. If a man rapes a woman, he has to pay. He has to marry her and pay for her. He can have as many wives as he wants if he can pay for them, by the way, because that's men. Men are like that. Men are allowed to, because in ancient herding cultures, men oppressed, beat women and children. The herding cultures were much more brutal than farming cultures, because in a herding culture, you could lose everything that you had in a single accident. All the cattle could run off a cliff or could get out of the pen at night. So the penalties and the teaching was very severe. And what's his name? Jared Diamond points out in one of his recent books that herding, it's just consistent. Herding cultures beat their children and beat their women. And foraging cultures don't punish their kids at all. Like, the kid's in trouble. He'll figure it out. Because in a foraging culture, you go out every day and you collect some bananas and you collect some papaya and you collect some roots and tubers and you rip up a couple of roots from a tree. What's the worst that can happen? Not much. No big whoop. But in a herding culture, you got minutes to, the cattle run away, they stampede, they kill some people, and then you can't get them back, or they're poached, they're stolen. So we inherited the psychology of a warlike herding culture, delivered to us, in, I think, the very false wrapping of Christianity, which is supposedly a religion of peace. It's not. And not at all. It's, the ancient Hebrew stuff is not a religion of peace. It's an angry old grumpy mountain god, called Yahweh, whose feminine counterpart, Asherah, essentially his bride, was killed, just dispatched with and destroyed. But he was just one of a polytheistic group, a pantheon of gods that all Near Eastern people worshipped, from Isis and Inanna to Ishtar to Marduk, to Yahweh and Asherah. They're all versions of, the male god like Thor or Zeus or Kronos, and the female god like Hera or Aphrodite or Athena, all embodying different portions of the human psyche. And so we inherited a false monotheism that's really just sort of an abridged, polytheism. And that culture formed an ethos in the Near East that said that women should be killed if they have sex with anybody who we don't approve of. And guess what we say today? If a woman has sex with somebody who's not her husband, she is
a slut.
A slut.
Or a whore, or whatever else they want to throw on her. The whore of Babylon.
Yeah, a degraded woman, a fallen woman. If a man has sex with somebody not his wife, he is?
He gets high fives and he's a bro.
Yo,
let's go get some beers, dog.
Dog.
No, you're right. It's very patriarchal in that sense, that it's okay for the male to go out and do it, but if the female did it, it's like, and it's not a war on women or anything like that. It goes back, like you said, it goes back to a very long time ago, ancient times, and it's just very patriarchal in nature, that it's okay for the guy to go out and do whatever he wants, but if the woman did it, it's horrific and evil. And the way I look at it is this: what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
And it is.
So if things are going to work, everything has to be on an even, open keel. You know what I'm saying? It has to be on this even, level plane. Otherwise, you're going to have this natural level of being out of balance one way or another.
And I actually do think it is a war on women, and women waged the war back on men through feminism. Now, feminism got a few things right, but what feminism really said was, it didn't say if you can go out to your strip clubs, we can actually have all the boy toys and the good relationships and romances that we want, because marriage is very unsatisfying after a while. They said, oh, we can't cheat, you can't cheat. So men, since feminism, have felt deeply, and I think that was why men pushed hard against feminism, because instead of saying, no, we actually just want to be as free as you, and we're cool with that, so you can go have sex, just don't give me herpes and don't get pregnant. Don't get anyone pregnant, and wait a day. You know, if you're going full around with somebody else to whatever degree that you feel comfortable doing that, please wait 24 to 48 hours to make sure you don't have any itchies and scratchies before you get back into bed with me. Very basic rules of etiquette that actually tend to work. But that's not what women said. They said, "Oh, no, we're the ones slaving away. Let us go to the office 12 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 9 hours, 10 hours, and slave away just like you do for the corporate masters and make crap and advertise crap, Mad Men shows us that girl Peggy wanting to become somebody who does nothing for a living. It makes believe, lies to people, and makes them buy crap. It's not very interesting, but that's what women decided feminism was." And now feminism is that if we can't have any extracurricular fun, even though as a species we're very sexual, let's get into the biological talk in the next hour, but we're very sexual, all biologists will tell you, who study this, will tell you that we're not a monogamous species biologically. We're not designed to be, we're not created to be, we're not engineered or evolved to be, you choose your word. We don't bear the marks of a monogamous species. We're not psychologically monogamous. We're not even, we're a little bit socially, we're tribal. We grew up in tribes, we relate to tribes, and when we were in the car, I came up with, something popped into my head that I've been thinking about, and I said, remember summer camp. Because summer camp is essentially our most natural state of being. So what do you remember about summer camp?
Oh, summer camp, you had a new love fling every 15 minutes. Like you said, we were talking yesterday. One day you're with Susie, and Susie's, the greatest thing in the world, and you're making out with her and everything else. And the next day you're with Joni, or, the next day you're with Karen. And then the next day you're with Heather. You know what I mean? And it's just, and summer camp was, how many flings would you have at summer camp, or crushes, or loves over the course of the 6 or 8 weeks that you were there, right? That's kind of what adults right now pretty much do. But nobody wants to admit to it. See, that's the thing that irritates me. Everybody's engaging in this behavior already. It's not like they're not. It's not like you're saying, you should do this, and, ha ha ha, I'm trying to lead you down the road. People are doing this already. It's just they don't own up to it.
People are doing.
Yeah, they just don't admit it. That's all.
Yeah. And when they don't actually do it, they want to do it. And they watch big, giant, fat Tony Soprano screwing these beautiful women. Why are they watching that? They're watching it because they long for it. They long to have real sexual experience and release. They long to have variety. And I'm not just talking about penetrative sex. I think that's a little overrated. And I think that as Americans who are repressed sexually, we run to penetrative sex too quickly. We want affection. We want touch, back kissing, hugs, back massages. We want all kinds of stuff long before you get to penetrative sex. We want the full experience of being touched to produce dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins. Excuse me. So summer camp was this great free-for-all because you were away from parents and the ridiculous rules. The counselors were also essentially in heat. They were late teenagers and early 20s. So the people who ran the camp would kind of make the walkthrough once in a while. But in between, and most of the time, you had a crush on somebody one day, and you went to the barn or something like that and made out with them. And the next day you saw her or him holding hands with somebody else, and you got sort of pissy. And then you said, well, I guess we're broken up. And you weren't really even going out. But, you had a good kiss and you liked it, and then you think you're broken up. So then you talk to her friend about it. She said, yeah, she's such a slut. Then you end up making out with her after she dishes on her friend, you end up kissing her, and then you think, and then she falls in love with you, and you go, oh, it was just fun. It was really nice talking with you, and the kissing was great. But actually, now that I'm broken up with this other person who I wasn't going out with, but I just kissed, I'm actually really interested in this person, and now she's just become interested in me, or he has, or whatever. Then you go out with that person. Not really go out. You just hang out with them. And if you think this is immature, this is a fast motion version of what tribes do. In tribes, as Chris Ryan and Casilda Jethop point out in some ways in Sex at Dawn, and many anthropologists will tell you, in foraging tribes, not herding tribes, if you want to get married, there's no word for marriage. They're just relationships that you want to have. And if you're an outdoor living tribe in a tropic equatorial region or in a very temperate region, you have your hammock that you sleep in, and you go and hang it next to the hammock of the person that you're suddenly with. Or you hang it in their hut. And that goes on for however it goes on. And then when you don't want to be with that person that way anymore, guess what you do? You move your hammock. And Chris Ryan has pointed this out many times. It's his line, but you move your hammock. It's not... And we go to the butcher's block with each other's head, with each other's body to decapitate each other. We parcel our things in half. We give half to the lawyer. We light the other half on fire and fight about it forever. We think it's contaminated by memories and failure. But the question then becomes, the question is, well, what about kids? So ask me the question. It's all well and good until somebody gets pregnant, right?
Okay, so what about the kids?
Well, in a tribe, who raises the kids? You got a tribe of, let's say, 70 people. Who raises the kids?
Usually the tribe, the elders. Usually, actually, after like 5-6 years old, the kids pretty much raise themselves because they're running around from dusk till dawn.
Yeah, the kids are raised by the group of children between post-weaning, 5 years old, and pre-adulthood, 13. So children are essentially raised in the kids group. They run around, they play kids games, they learn kids things. Only once in a while somebody comes in and sort of arbitrates, but mostly they're doing what they can do. They're gathering what they can gather, they're making what they can make, and that's life. We talked about this. Do you remember growing up when we had a lot of time to ourselves as kids, and there was there was very little television to occupy us. There was no internet. There was no such thing as a DVD or a VCR. What did we do? What did you do?
My mother woke me up when we didn't have school. Okay, we had to go to school, obviously, but we didn't have school, right? My mother would, during the summer, we had summer break. There was no sleeping until 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. My mother came in between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning, by 8 o'clock the latest, and we had those old school pull-down shades, where you tug on them and they would just go up and wind up. Well, she would come in, grab the 2 strings, yank on them, the shades would go flying up, and she'd come over and rip the comforter off the bed. Time to wake up. And I grew up north, so it was a little chilly during the winter. She'd rip the covers right off the bed. Time to get up, get out of bed. And, that's how we got up for school. And summertime, it was the same way. She'd got time to get up, get out of bed, and go play. What? I got to go play? Yeah, go outside and don't come back for at least 8 to 10 hours. Don't come back until 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whenever we were supposed to be back by. And don't be late either. If you were 5 minutes late, you got your ass beat. But I didn't have to be late. I didn't have to break the rules. There was no urge to break the rules because my mother had a clear set thing. Go out and play all day. So by the time I came home 6 or 7 o'clock at night, I was exhausted. Yeah, I did boy things. Got in trouble, lit up fireworks, did all that stuff, But, rode bikes, motorcycles, skateboards, whatever. But by 7 o'clock, I was home. I was wiped out. It's not even that I was trying to be a rebel and, screw being home at 7, I'll be home at 7. I was exhausted. I wanted to go home at 7 o'clock and get something to eat and take a shower because I'd been out all day. I burned off that child energy. I was a normal kid. I played cops and robbers or whatever with my friends and ran around the woods with sticks pretending they were rifles and chucking rocks at each other like they were grenades, right? We played soldier and cowboy and Indians or tag or whatever. What was the other one? Manhunt, where everybody would, like one huge game of tag pretty much, or hide and seek in the woods at night. That's what we would go do. We were normal children. We burned off energy. We learned from watching the bigger kids. Like you said, who raised the children? Sometimes, who taught you stuff when you were a kid? When you were 10 years old, how did you learn a lot of the stuff that you learned as a child? From the other kids around you, right?
My older friends.
Right, exactly.
Who learned it from their older brothers and sisters. And sometimes like the 13-year-olds will learn things from the 16-year-olds. But we didn't, I mean, the idea that like some 25 or 30-year-old was going to hang out with us wouldn't have made any sense. But that's what people do now. Like I was just in Los Angeles, and there are people putting their kids through their kids are going to one of the good schools out there, and so this is like a 6-year-old isn't keeping up with the reading program, so they're all very anxious, and they have to get the child into some tutoring because she's not up to her level with reading. She's 6. Who cares? She's learning to read. Yeah, but this is the mindset. The mindset is totally distracted from anything that actually matters because this girl is very bright and she'll learn to read. It doesn't really matter that she's up with the group because nobody knows how to tie any knots. Nobody knows how to build anything out of wood. Nobody knows how to find any food in a wilderness. Nobody knows anything. Nobody knows anything of value. But we used to be raised by groups of kids, and we learned whatever we learned. And even though we weren't really foraging, I guess we learned where the candy and the soda machines were. So we learned that too. And we learned to eat birch bark. That was still something that I did when I was a kid. We learned to eat birch bark. So kids are raised by the group of kids. So it doesn't matter so much that you might have a relationship with somebody after having a relationship with somebody else, because your kids were raised by the group, and you were bound to the group, and you would go find food for the group, and everything was shared. You didn't have to take care of your child at night. Let's go do your homework. There was no homework.
Because it had to be like that because they had to survive. That was the next generation of that tribe. So it was in everybody's best interest, the entire tribe's best interest, to make sure that the next generation,
right,
was okay and fed properly and, had the proper nutrients and, non-GMO foods. Well, they didn't really have GMO foods back then. It was just called food back then, ironically. You could just go get food. You didn't have to worry about whether or not it was genetically altered or not.
Well,
the break
I'd like
is
to make the
sneaking
argument
up.
after the break about biology, but I'll just put that as a note. I'd like to talk about that.
No, well, I want to get in. That's what I want to get into because that's where a lot of your argument about whether or not mankind is actually a monogamous species or not actually lies. And it's an interesting look. You make a lot of interesting, valid points, man. I can't say you don't. A lot of the stuff, like I said, the conversation, it was just like, wow, he's got a point. And I know other people that have had the same conversation with you, and they said the same thing. So I thought it was important for the people to at least hear and contemplate. With that, I want everybody to stay tuned. 3 short, quick minutes, and we will be right back. Do not go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. Tonight's topic is an interesting one. It's not something I usually talk about on Down the Rabbit Hole, but after going through what I've been going through in my life over the past few months, I have a very interesting new philosophical perspective on things, I guess you could say. And I've been having some interesting, enlightening conversations with some of my friends, including comedian and author, radio show host, Mr. Liam Scheff. And Liam and I were discussing relationships, sex, love, marriage, religion, and everything. And the conversation kind of went, we went very deep on all of those topics. But it was a very interesting, enlightening conversation, to say the least, because as you might have heard in the first hour, at least from my research, everybody in this country is sexually active, we'll say. Okay, there's a large contingent of the adults in this country, even the young adults, that are sexually active, but they don't want to admit to it. They hide. They pretend they don't do it. They lie about it. It's hidden. And I think in a very large part that plays into society's problems because people are repressing who they really are. People are repressing how they feel. And you see it. I mean, people are in relationships. Like I know couples where maybe the husband is into something sexually that the wife's not, right? But because they're afraid to talk about how they feel about things in between the two of them, that lack of communication between the two of them leads to bigger problems because then they don't communicate on other things and they start to have this divide between the two of them. And why? Why? They could have been best friends. They could have gone through all this stuff together, but maybe it started with the sex, and then they stop, and maybe the wife is afraid or turned off or something, and then the husband gets pissed, and it just grows this huge divide, and then the relationship breaks up. Maybe the husband goes and cheats on the wife. Maybe the wife goes and cheats on the husband, whatever. And it all comes from you were so scared of just telling the person about what you were into, and it snowballed into this mess. I mean, I know people that they were into stuff and they didn't want to tell their wife because maybe they tried telling their wife one thing one time and the wife copped an attitude or called them a freak or whatever. And because they reacted that way, the person felt shameful for having nothing more than a primal urge. Okay. I'm not talking about the people that are sick, twisted, and they have weird thing. I'm not talking, not fetishes either. I'm talking, like the really sick, evil stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking regular sex with another human being is a very primal urge. I'm not talking about what floats your boat mentally. That's a whole psyche thing. I'm talking about the very act of having sex is a very primal thing, and to repress that in nature at all, I think is very unhealthy, and that's one of the reasons we have such a large mental health problem in this country. And it's not just the sexual repression that leads to other types of repression too, because if you're repressing your true self sexually and who you are as a person inside that way, then you're bound to be repressing yourself on a spiritual level, political level, whatever, who you are into what you really believe in. If you're going to take something as deep and personal that you believe in as sex and hide it and lie about it and portray something that you're not to the outside world and then do something completely opposite, you're probably going to do it with stuff that's not as deep as that. Just saying. Thoughts?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. Well, many topics in there. Hold on. Thoughts. Well, I want to talk about the biology of sexuality, which is reviewed again in a number of books. You can read The Myth of Monogamy by Barash and Lipton. It's a book by biologists that goes out of its way to tell us that we're not even slightly monogamous as a species, and then begs us to be monogamous because the people who write it are a married couple. So how funny is that? There's a book by Helen Fisher called The Anatomy of Love, which is pretty wonky, a little frumpy and academic, which tells us that we're not monogamous as a species. And then tells us that maybe we should try to be. So there's what they call a bias, a built-in bias in the work of these researchers, because they're looking at the data and they're saying, look, when women are ovulating and their hormone levels are high, they hike up their skirts higher. They tend to have more what I call extracurricular affection. People call it cheating. I don't, because sex isn't, relationships aren't a game. So I don't understand the concept of cheating. If you mean that you're having extra sex outside or sexual contact or sensual contact. And let's define what cheating is, because apparently it's anything. It's a look, it's a wish, it's a desire, it's a hug, it's a flirtation. I mean, anything to some people is cheating. And that drives us to say, well, if I'm going to go a little bit, I might as well go all the way. So I'm just going to put it in and that'll be that. Well, that's a mistake. I mean, what... We don't, there's a stupid movie and book called Shades of Grey. We're a million hues of color in between white and black. It's not shades of gray. We have all of these ways to express, all of these varieties in the way that we get turned on or the way that we want to express normal affection. Again, from hugging and back rubs and foot rubs and kissing and grinding and talking. A lot of talking, but just laying close and talking is so intimate and so beautiful and so heartwarming, and it's so natural. We make oxytocin, we make serotonin, dopamine, endorphins by engaging in this behavior. We heal our bodies. It's all built in. On what planet would this be bad for it? Now, be bad for us? Now think about how to control a species. Take the thing that's most natural and tell them that it's the most unnatural thing they can do. And instill that as brainwashing in them. Tell them that there's only one place they can do it, and it's in your business office, aka church or government office. Tell them that they want to do this all the time, but they can only do it one way. And if they do it another way, they're sinners. They're not just sinners, but they're out. They're culturally out. They're debauched. You said not debauched. I don't know why the girls going into a tattoo shop and getting turned on by somebody who's good at finding their G-spot. What's debauched about that? This is very normal behavior. This is what happens all the time. That's different, but they're presenting their vaginas to be pierced, so it's pretty natural that conversations around orgasms might come up. It wouldn't be unexpected. Now, and I can tell you in the restaurant business, if you work in a restaurant or any collective of people, just everybody is up everybody else's skirt or down their pants at some point, because this is just what we are normally, naturally. Men are very sexual and horny. Nobody debates that. But women are very sexual, very horny. People still debate that. But the biologists, the anthropologists, the behavioral scientists have, hooked up the electrodes and watched people and said, yeah, actually women think about sex not as often as men, but pretty close. And they get turned on by more things. Whereas men will get turned on generally by men having sex with women or women having sex with women. Women will get turned on by almost anything that's remotely sexual, and they won't even understand why, but it doesn't matter. They get turned on. Women make loud noises when they have sex. Why? Chris Ryan talks about this, and the researchers who did this work, whose names I don't remember, I don't know, or I didn't read I didn't memorize all of their names in the papers, but the researchers who came up with this idea, it's a very logical idea. If we were a species that lived in the plain and the jungle, and there were animals around, and we were on our backs or sitting up facing each other or front to rear or whatever, having intercourse, it would seem that we were in a slightly precarious position to be really loud in case any animals came by. But what is it that women do when they're having a good time sexually?
Well, I would assume that, from our conversation yesterday, I assumed originally that you told me that the noise making was different. I assumed it was just pleasure noise making, but you said that it was actually a way of announcing to the rest of the other males that there was a female, I guess, in almost like a female in heat, letting the other males around her know that she was in heat. So and a lot of this is very primal and biological. That's why I think it's possible for someone to be monogamous with someone else, but they have to constantly make that choice. And I think, honestly, at one point or another, it's like they say, religion will say, temptation will rear its ugly head. I don't know if it's temptation, if you want to call it like evil temptation. I think it's more just that in the human biology, that's going to happen. It's just by choice whether or not you choose to act on your biology or you say, no, I choose not to. I think it's possible for it to happen. But I've seen people that live happily ever after,
I haven't.
to a certain degree. Well, I understand. Let me ask you this: what happens? What do you think happens? Like, if the person's in their 60s or 70s, eventually. I know there's older people that do swing, and they have, in a lot of these older 55 plus communities, there's a lot of that actually going on, that you'd be surprised. But
don't butt that. Why don't you
I'm just saying, yes, it does happen, but what happens? Do you agree that maybe after the sex dies down that there has to be more than just that? Obviously there has to be mental stimulation.
I don't think I never said just sex. In fact, I very clearly said there are 100 layers of affection and colors between this shaking hands that we think is that we think is just somebody and screwing, which we think is somehow sex. It seems that nobody understands what I'm saying. I try to talk about this with people, and they get very confused. I'm trying to explain that you're going to have many romantic and emotional relationships throughout life, and many of them are going to overlap as your friendships overlap. You're going to have many friendships at the same time. Some of them are going to be sensual. Some of them are going to be sexual. It's up to you to decide what they're going to be. It's not really up to you. It's up to your level of natural, spiritual, chemical, psychological intertwining. But I wrote an article that's up at my website, Liam Scheff, my name, .com, SCH like school, EFF.com, called New Creative Love During Marriage, in which I outline the idea, and it's also at Truth Frequency Radio, in which I outlined the idea that it's totally natural that over a long period of time with a single person, you're going to learn each other's sexual bag of tricks. You're going to have to winnow down your erotic relationship to something like a business partnership because you're going to have so many responsibilities together. The modern world puts us into these little lifeboats. We're supposed to be in a nuclear life pod. Well, we're a tribal species. We're not supposed to be nuclear, but it tells us that we have to do everything together, two people. We have to be each other's marriage partners, sex partners, best friends, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, doctors, nurses, chauffeurs, co-parents, co-child psychologists, bill payers, mortgage payers, rent payers, water utility problem payers, get out of the, get the car fixed people that you have to rely on for everything. People go crazy. Accountants, vacation planners, co-taxpayer. We have so many responsibilities on us that nobody in the ancient world would say, I don't understand. How is this freedom? And we say that only two people can do this. And then if you're not, you're cheating. Like I said, if you wanted to invent a system in which you made people so distracted and crazy that you could get away with anything, what would you do? You would take the most natural thing that they wanted to do, which was be affectionate with each other, and tell them it was a crime. Period. That's the center of this argument. We are being manipulated, and people actually take this on as a means of telling themselves that they're ethical. Well, I have all these urges, but I don't do anything. Well, I'm so sorry that you don't trust your own urges. I'm so sorry that you don't trust your own instincts to like somebody, to care about somebody, to form a relationship with somebody. I'm so sorry that you're not able to communicate with a long-term partner about what really matters, and that you think that your relationship with them centers around the concept of genital ownership only. I find that really, really sad. I understand it, but it's sad because we're much more than that. So I don't understand the concept of just sex. I don't ever have just sex. I don't go with anybody that I don't truly care about. So I don't understand that as a concept. I don't swing. I'm not a swinger. I mean, I don't go in for stunt sex. I wouldn't. I don't even understand it I just don't understand it.
Well, see, I bring that up because I know that there's going to be somebody out there that has that viewpoint, right? So they're not going to maybe understand. I know there's a lot of the listeners that might think that what we're talking about. No. I was raised that it's you have a husband and wife. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm bringing this up because it's.
I am.
Well, I mean, no, I know you are. I'm not trying. I want people to make their own minds up. You know what I mean? But I'm not trying to shove anything down anybody's throat, I should say. I just want people to have this conversation and not be afraid to talk about it with each other. I think if people were more comfortable and open with each other, then this place, our country as a whole, right now everybody's just so afraid to even have any conversations about anything. Yet, like you said, you bring up sex with people. You could have if you're sitting with a group of people at a bar or whatever, and you bring up the topic of sex, everybody's going to start talking about it. Mm-hmm. The stories are going to come up, the most debaucherous things you've ever seen or whatever are partaken in, and everybody has a story. It's amazing. Everybody has a story, yet nobody wants to admit that they're doing it. Again, this repression, and to me, it's more than just a sexual thing. It's a repression on many levels. If you're repressing yourself who you are sexually, if you're not into anything and you're not wild, then that's fine. That's not everybody's cup of tea. But if you are, and you're just afraid to admit it because of something, a guilt that was put into your head by whatever from the time you were a child, your parents, your religion, whatever, that's unhealthy for the human psyche. It's unhealthy physically for the body.
Popeye, everybody's repressed. Everybody grew up being told that the Judeo-Christian model was the only model and that they're sinners. What I'm saying is if you really wanted to control people, you would tell them that one of the healthiest things that they did that formed large group cohesion, long-term stability in relationships in which people really knew and trusted each other and were bound pretty deeply together. You would tell them that was criminal, and then you would cut away all of their support until there were just two of them alone. You would have what is it called? Divided and conquered. I mean, this whole sexual thing is divide and conquer. They've divided us from our tribe, and now we're down to two. Now we're pitted against each other because we constantly have to monitor each other and spy on each other. This is the system that we live in. We live in a system in which we're essentially total slaves, spying on each other to make sure that we don't do anything that's normal and healthy for us, aka kissing somebody else, having a date, having a romance, meeting somebody new, even though we're married for a long time, meeting somebody and having a great conversation or starting a new friendship that genuinely supports us. Now, people go, well, how do I manage that? Well, you manage it by talking about it. What would it be like if a woman were allowed to have a bunch of guys who really, really cared about her? And she was able to be sensual or sexual to a degree of her choosing with a group of guys. not all at the same level. And maybe there was one who was her longest term partner, and maybe there was one who was her shortest term partner, and maybe there was one who was her most active sex partner, and maybe there was the one who was her best friend. What happens to a woman in this society, our society, if a husband dies? We both know this. What happens when your spouse dies? You go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's the most horrible thing. You feel disconnected. You feel completely disconnected from everything around you. I mean, in every way, shape, and form. And you feel disconnected from love, other human beings. I mean, that person, when your spouse like that, like Marseille was my best friend. She was my soulmate. So when I lost her, it was like not only my connection with the real world, my connection with my life, but it was like any physical connection, any emotional, any love. The person that gave me my love, the person that touched me, even if it was just a hug or a kiss, and you could feel that energy from, that was all gone. I was isolated and alone and by myself. And that sucks. I mean, it's horrible for any human to go through. It is the most, I can't describe how it feels. There is no verbal way to describe how awful that feels, how lonely that feels, how bad it hurts you.
That's right.
And when you're able to feel love in any way, shape, or form again, any way, shape, or form, whether it be sexual, whether it be intellectual or just emotional, not even on a physical level. Maybe it's just on an emotional level where you finally allow yourself to be yourself around somebody again for the first time. And like your honest self.
So let's talk about life in a tribe. You've just described life in a nuclear monogamous society. Life in a nuclear monogamous society says you can only be bound to one person. Otherwise, you're a whore, a slut, and a cheater. Okay, well, great. What about this? You're in a tribe. There are a lot of, you have about 4 or 5 people who you've occasionally had flings with, you go out with. One of them is killed by a mastodon. One of them is killed by a falling coconut or a rock or something like that. God forbid. But what do? Your whole world doesn't crumble. You're very sad. You're hurt. Guess what you're surrounded by? People who love you. People who you're deeply invested in. People who are there to give you affection and keep you from becoming cripplingly depressed, as you and I both have experienced due to the loss of our partner. So in a society in which it's expected that romance is something that comes and goes, romance fades, and the call to a new romance is really, eventually, it's either the call to a kind of a psychological awakening, a spiritual lesson, or just a new friend. And it's just very exciting in the beginning, so you're a little frisky. All romances, eventually, if they don't become friendships, they fall away. So any romance that stays has to become a friendship, at which point it cools down. Nobody screws at 6 years the way they did it at 3 months. Nobody. It doesn't happen. You don't have the time. You're too busy with other things. But if you don't allow that time to bond in the beginning, you don't really, sort of realize the relationship. And if you're constantly being held against this notion that, Jesus hates pussy or something, or whatever it is that people, I don't even understand what they think. But whatever that people tell themselves about sex, and that you can only love one, the heart can love many people at a time. How many of your friends do you truly love? Almost all of them? How many of your children do you love? Almost all of them? How many of your brothers and sisters do you love, even though you hate them sometimes? All of them to some degree. So why can't you have a couple of romance partners? On what planet can you not actually find, the more you love, actually, the more you're capable of loving, which is very surprising, because our culture says that love is something that only comes in very small bundles and you have to guard with knives. We come from a scarcity culture. But it's needless. It's pointless. How about biology? The penis is shaped with a plunger-shaped head. Researchers talk about this. Chris Ryan talks about this. The plunger-shaped head creates a suction motion when you pull back. You remember that sound that has sometimes happened to you, boys and girls, when you're screwing? Right? Remember it? Huh? And you think you don't know what that is? That sound is the sound. The penis is built to pull out sperm that are already there. Not your sperm. It wouldn't worry about pulling your sperm out. It's worried about pulling other people's sperm out. In other words, we've evolved, or we're designed, or whatever you want to think, as a species that is built not for physical competition with each other, but for sperm competition. So the truth is that a woman could have sex with 3 people in the course of 4 days while she's, ovulating and the egg is ready. And the best sperm, not the best sperm, the most, I don't know what it would be called, histocompatible, the best chemically compatible sperm would have the best chance of making it to her egg. We don't have to restrict her unless we're trying to get her to have bad birth. What I'm saying is sperm don't just all swim. Some of the sperm are there to block other guys' sperm. We have this in mind in our bodies. This is many millions of years old, these processes.
Like linebackers on the football field.
Some sperm are linebackers. Some sperm are sprinters. They're not all the same, which is a surprise to me because when I was a kid, I was told that the sperm go in and then they run as fast and the fastest one gets there. It's not the case. We're built. Women vocalize to let other men know that she's ready, so that she can have the healthiest baby. So she can have sex with a variety of people during her ovulatory period. And if you think this sounds fanciful, this happens, by decree in some cultures. South American tribes who believe in what they call partable or shareable paternity or fatherhood. They believe that the more women that if the woman is getting ready to be pregnant or trying to get pregnant, she'll have sex with all of the really great contenders, the fastest, the best athlete, the smartest, the best looking, the best artist. They believe then that all of those men share in the fatherhood of the child. Well, that's a great way to bind people together, to make sure that everybody's looked after, and to let everybody have a little bit of fun. Everybody cares about everybody then. Now people always say, well, what about jealousy? So let me tell you that jealousy is real, and so is anger, and so is sadness, and all of these things pass. We've imagined that jealousy is something that doesn't pass, but it passes like taking a dump. You express it, and then you don't feel it anymore. As long as your partner goes, no, I still really love you. I love you for this, this, and this, and I love this person for this, this, and this. You go, okay, at least I know where I stand, and that's good.
But wouldn't you agree that it's, at least in my viewpoint, and I agree that biologically, I agree, we're animals. So I wholeheartly agree with you. You know that. But I do believe
I think
that
the word animal gets a bad rap when.
Well, you know what I mean. I not animal like raw, like bad way, but primal. But I do believe that it's a choice thing. Like again, I think if the people make the choice, that's their own choice.
I can't debate that because I can't tell anybody what to do. I'm just trying to describe what we are. And if people want to defy their actual nature, that's their business. I feel sorry for them. I mean, if they want to go through life going, no, I won't think that, well, you're thinking it. I won't think that, well, you're thinking it.
Right, you're thinking it because you're saying, I won't think about it.
Yeah, you're thinking it. So what are you doing? You can go to church all day long and beg forgiveness for your dirty thoughts, or you can get up and go, these aren't such dirty thoughts after all. After all, I just want to have sex with 2 women at the same time and have them sit on my face. That's not the worst thing that anybody's ever done. It's not even going to hurt you.
Well, I have to agree. Sex isn't the worst thing people have done on this planet. There's way worser things. I'm going to pause this right there because the break's sneaking up. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 short minutes. Stay tuned. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, tonight's topic, again, relationships, sex, religion. I don't want you to, I'm not trying to get you to walk away from this going, oh my God, he's changed my whole life. Look, I know that's not realistically going to happen. All I want you to do is open your mind and think about the topics tonight. When Liam's new book comes out, grab a copy of it. That way you can read it. You don't have to agree with him. You could hate everything he's saying, but at least listen to the information with an open mind. And I'm not, Liam is trying to get you to believe what he says. That's fine. That's his goal. That's what he's supposed to do as the author and researcher of this subject matter. I just want you to understand that there's a different perspective out there, and you might benefit from this different perspective. You never know. Why don't you give it a shot? I mean, it can't hurt just to sit and think about it. It's not like I'm asking you to go do anything you shouldn't be doing. I'm just asking you to use your free will and free thought and a little bit of logic. That's all. And if you don't agree, you don't agree. Like, again, I think it's a matter of choice.
But what if you do?
What if you do agree? Again, it could be world-changing. You told me that, there are you've put up a website and people can contact you, and already people have contacted you with questions, and that people have gone back and forth with you, and they're realizing in their own personal relationships, wow, Liam's right.
Well, I've had many conversations with friends and people who became friends or people that I've just spoken with once or twice. When I say that we should be free to have a variety of relationships over our lifespans, no one argues with me. When I say that it's normal to fall in love many times during your lifetime, no one argues with me. When I say that you should essentially have the right to negotiate the terms of your relationship the way you would a loan, a mortgage, a business plan, no one really argues. When I say that it would be better if we were more tribal and raised children as children of the group rather than as two little monetary slaves in a house in which all the entire network of the petroleum industry has to keep going. I mean, none of us can live without 150 or 200 oil slaves per day. That's petroleum doing the work that people used to do. And when petroleum grinds down a little bit, we don't have as much, which is now or soon, we're going to be leaning on each other. We're going to be pressed up against each other in collectives, and farming collectives, and sewing collectives, and in fabricating collectives. Attractions are going to happen all over the place. It's going to be summer camp 2.0. That's what people do. We form attractions, and these attractions drive us to discover things about ourselves, to make new partnerships. If a man has 5 women that he's interested in, and one is a best friend, and one is somebody who he just can't stop sucking on her pheromones and screwing, and one is somebody who he loves hanging out with and laughing with, and one is a fill-in for somebody else. If anything happens to any of them, he's still got a very strong network of people. If all of those women each have a few people that they lean on, and I'm not saying that they're all having intercourse, which is what people misunderstand.
Well, interestingly enough,
but they might be but they're having affection. They're fully permitted to be affectionate,
fully
affectionate.
In the Christian culture, don't they have kind of like the same thing? They have godparents, right? At least I remember growing up. I was raised in a Christian family. Like my mother and father went to church. Even though I had Judaism in the family, my mom still she was Protestant later on, and then she went back to Judaism or whatnot, whatever. Anyway, the point is there were godparents, right? And I always thought the godparents were just for the children. But actually, if you understand, like the role of the godparents is say like if the husband died, right? The guy who's the godfather, the male godparent, he's supposed to also step in and take care of the woman too. There's more to it. It's not just.
And by taking care of, he means finger banging.
Well,
so you're not confused.
Thank you, Liam, for making sure everybody had that.
Why are we tiptoeing around this?
No, you're right. So the point is that.
All right, let's talk about Inuit culture. In Inuit culture, it's very dangerous culture. People can freeze to death. When a man goes on a very dangerous thing, another man will go keep his wife company. What do you think that means? What do you think the expression "keeping her warm" actually means? Yeah, go keep her warm.
Well, they use body heat, duh.
Yeah, well, but more than that, nobody in an isolated situation can be allowed to flounder in a real tribal culture. So they have to provide for each other, and the understanding is that we actually have to all get through this together. And sex is the great bonder. You have sex with somebody, you're bound to them. You feel great passion, or at least kindness, or for God's sake, at least some sort of, well, I've seen you naked and I've, tasted your junk. And so you may just feel very connected, or at least like you have some obligation. Now, we make too much out of this. Oh, my God, we're so spiritually connected now. Shut up. Go on a date with somebody, like, give it 6 years, honestly. Give the relationship 6 years. And you'd be like, you know what, I could really use something different. That's all. Just something different. And maybe it's the biological urge to have a variety of support. We're supposed to have a variety of support structures. But this culture has convinced us through mass hypnotism and brainwashing that the best thing we can do is isolate ourselves in one little house that's powered by the oil company, get into a little metal box, go to a job, turn off all day long, not touch anybody there, not flirt with anybody there. If we do anything there, confess to a priest or to our partner. And if we do that too many times, go to a divorce, give up half of what we've earned, light it on fire, give it to the lawyer, split up and start all over again. It's mental illness. Culture-wide mental illness. Absolutely. And the solution is that you should be allowed to flirt. You should talk to your partner, renegotiate the terms of your relationship, figure out what you're okay with. It's okay. Go out and kiss somebody once in a while. I guarantee when they come back and say, I kissed somebody, first you'll be jealous, and then you go, well, how was it? And then say, it was good. It wasn't like you, it was different. And then guess what will happen? You'll be turned on. You won't even be able to explain it. You'll be so turned on, and you'll be so ravenous for this person that you thought you were jealous of, you will jump on them. You will be surprised by what happens when you allow this. A whole new world opens up.
And you yourself, again, you've
lived it.
You've lived it. Not only have you had people tell you about their own experiences, but you yourself have actually lived this life.
Yeah, I lived it.
And you've told me, and I've seen it, from you living your life. It does work for you. I mean, yeah. I can't lie and say I can't come on air and say Liam's wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, I know other people that Liam's have conversations with that are very staunch believers in monogamous relationships that we both know, and even they agree that he's on to something. I mean, there's definite. I can't disagree with you because you make so many valid points and you point out a lot of scientifically provable things, a lot of valid things. I do think that some people, if you want to call it repressing, that's actually a good way to put it, repressing their natural urges. People can do that. But I do agree that the way it's been institutionalized, the way monogamy is hammered into people's heads and the way people are made to feel bad about feeling attraction towards, somebody else other than their spouse, I think that's a huge problem in society. I think that's really, like you said, like I said earlier, it's causing a lot of mental problems. It's repression of the true self.
And again, I'm not talking about going and putting your dick in everything. I really am talking about finding levels of affection that are suitable to what you feel for people. As a culture, we run to to penetration, and it's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Some of the best times I've ever had with people were sitting on a couch or on the lawn or something like that and petting each other's hair and talking and occasional kisses and hand holding. I can't tell you what that's done for me, what it's meant for me, how it's bonded me with some of, the people that I've cared about the most. It's not the heaviest thing in the world. It doesn't have to be. I've had very heavy, sweaty, intense sex too, and it's nice and it's interesting, but it's not everything. Now, I want to sell some of my current books, so I want to tell you that Chapter 6 is all about sex, and because I've really always talked about sex. When I was talking about the HIV thing, I was talking about essentially scientific Catholicism, because the HIV thing is a form of mind control in which you get a test that they tell you doesn't test for anything specific. They'll be very honest with you about that. No, we don't know, comes up positive for everything. And then they tell you that if you're black or gay, that it's, probably means you're going to die someday. We're not sure when. Send cash. We're still doing research. Then you take drugs that kill you, and you have to tell everybody that you're a sexual leper. That's called, the AIDS industry. I've dissected that, analyzed it, taken it apart. It's right there for you in Chapter 6 of Official Stories. And that's one of 10 topics that you'll have dissected, taken apart, and handed back to you for your examination in that book, which is now $12 on Amazon and less than $10 on CreateSpace. So I would just, if you like this talk, if you want to support the independent research, please go buy a bunch of books. And if you buy over 3 or 4, just write me on Facebook and put the money in my PayPal, and I'll have them sent to you for less. My shipping is less because my cost is less because I take off the shipping if you buy over 5. Anyway, that's Official Stories, and Chapter 6 is all about the sexual mind control put forward by the medical industrial complex.
And
can he tap dance?
You were telling me, I asked you, we got into the whole HIV versus, AIDS thing. And you said that one of your biggest problem with that whole thing was the fact that they had, they were getting people, they were giving these tests, they were false. They were giving, false positives. And it was like the scarlet letter. and then that was affecting people's lives, their sex lives and their lives. It was impacting their lives as a whole, and it was almost weaponizing sex to a certain degree, which I guess pissed you off because, again, this is like one of your fortes. So
Yeah, well, my primary interest is in being allowed to be free. I believe that you should be allowed to be free and maintain your responsibilities. I don't see any real problem with maintaining the responsibilities of running a household, and also having a number of people who you're quite affectionate and kind to. I don't even understand that as a possible conflict of interest. Now, the religious nudniks come up to me and say, well, God instituted, and I think, oh, you know what? Please be quiet. You're not quoting history. You're not quoting anything reproducible. You're quoting a fantasy that you believe in. I don't care. It's your business. Don't institute it on anybody else's policy. Don't quote it from authority, and don't pretend you know what you're talking about, because the Bible is not an historical document. It's not even close. The Mormon Bible is not an historical document. There is no religious document, and even my favorites, the Vedas, the Hindu scriptures, they're not historical documents, they're philosophical documents, and I accept them as such, and they're very beautiful in parts. Okay, but the scientific community also is allowed to pretend that they speak from absolute truth, just like the religious nudniks. They both come from a position of absolute truth. Well, they don't. They recapitulated Leviticus. If a man lies with a man, he shall be killed. And they did it for the gay community that was taking tetracycline and every other drug and poppers and made themselves very sick, antibiotics, destroyed their guts. They came up with a test that comes up positive for everything, has no standard. And they said, now you guys are sexual lepers. Now, they might have gotten sick from sex. I mean, they had 10 STDs at a time. You can get sick from sex. Don't get me wrong. Don't be a whore. Don't run around having sex with, be a prostitute, get paid for it. That's your business. But don't be careless and think that you can't get an STD. STDs are real. So pay attention. Don't go from bed to bed thinking that you can't spread anything. You can spread things. But I make the point that the HIV police are really sitting on a bunch of bad eggs. They're very perverse. They tell you that you have an STD that you can't see or feel, you never know that you have, and the experts can tell you. It's the exact same thing as the Catholic confessional. So HIV is essentially Catholicism for scientists. We own you. We own your sexual organs. We own your sex life. Confess, 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 confess. It's control. It's mind control. And it's nonsense. So that's official. Anyway, I make that argument in Official Stories with details.
Interesting argument. And it's an interesting book. Now, there's two ways to get it. It's not just, they can get a paperback, but they can also do the ebook version, right?
The ebook version is a steal. It's $3. So you can read the book for $3, yes. And
would you suggest, obviously, both just go directly to you?
What?
For both versions, the ebook?
No, if you want ebook, you have to go through Kindle. That's my deal there. That's the deal I struck. But if you want paperbacks and you like, people give them as gifts. I have a lot of repeat buyers. So if you want, because they're fun to read. I mean, did Shakespeare write Shakespeare? Is 9/11 caused by 19 hijackers? Who shot JFK? Really? Is Big Bang Theory true? No. Plate tectonics? No. Darwinism? No. I mean, Darwinism, accidentally things happen? No, that's not really, it's not really a science. So I explain the arguments and why they're wrong from a non-Christian perspective, what the sciences get wrong and what it points to in terms of having a larger worldview, of a more interesting universe than a big dumb accident, of a clearly patterned, intelligent universe that makes stuff, that forms itself into stuff. When you look at it from the electromagnetic perspective of constantly aligning, as we were talking about before, fractal-shaped intelligences, you go, wow, okay, now I get it. I see it. It's everywhere. Intelligence is everywhere. It's not a guy in the sky. It's everywhere. And when you get there, it's, I don't know. I find it very, liberating. So,
look, I think people need to take 5 minutes out of their day and just step outside the box with their thinking. Whether they read your current book, your new one. That's good. By the way, when's the new one coming out? Is there a date?
2 months.
Okay, so in 2 months, is there going to be a pre-order period? By the way, because I forgot to ask you that.
I I'd have to have a place to store a lot of books, and I'd have to have help mailing them. So as far as I know, there's not going to be a pre-order period.
Okay, so just 2 months, the new book will be out. Anyway, whether people get the current one, which I urge them to do, or they get the new one, I just want people to think. I just want people to take 5 minutes a day and think outside the box. That's how we're going to at least enlighten ourselves a little bit. And that'll lead to bettering humanity as a whole and having conversations with others. Don't be afraid to talk to somebody about this stuff, even if you're not into it. Just because you're talking or even listening to this broadcast or talking to someone about it doesn't mean you're into it. But you can have a conversation about it. I mean, it's not gonna kill you or turn you into a sexual deviant because you have a conversation about sex.
But what if you are into it? What if you actually, instead of the negative, which we always have to, I understand, I'm a host too, so I understand affirming the people who are anxious. But there's so many people who are going, man, you know what? I really wish we could loosen things up. Go talk about it. Read my article, New Creative Love During Marriage. Go share it with people. I have a part of my website where you can write me with your sexual questions. I'm not talking about, my penis is so big I can't fit it into a mason jar. That's your problem. Don't write me with that kind of stuff. I'm talking about questions relating to the trouble of your relationship and the desire not to suicide your current relationship while you open yourself up to other strong friendships. If you want to talk about that, you can write me. I also do what's called coaching, because I can't be a counselor because I'd have to go suck PhD butt for, $400,000, and I'm just not going to, whatever.
To be licensed?
And then you just lie, and it's all these lies, and you have to memorize all of the stuff that doesn't work, and you have to affirm the Judeo-Christian line anyway. So if I do have friends and some people that I have coached, and I'll have a part of my website, and I talk to them calmly. I ask them what their interests are. I ask them what they have in common that they do together, and what the strengths of their relationship are and what their complaints are. And I make the arguments to them that they're allowed to think that they haven't failed. There's nothing that's failed. They're allowed to continue to be good parents. They're even continue to allowed to be sexually attracted to each other, but they might want to expand their tribal network. And there are ways to do it. Most of it involves clear communication and not putting bits in each other's mouth. I think the mistake that some couples make when they do this is they're so anxious about, and I understand, I'm not mocking it, but they're so anxious about being left behind that they need to do everything. And I have some friends in California, and I know the woman was very interested in another guy, and she's also bisexual, and she ended up telling her husband that she was bisexual and that she was interested in another guy, but he said, well, you can be bisexual because that suits my needs, but you can't be interested in the other guy. And she folded like a lawn chair. Okay, well, I got something. I think that we have to learn to really listen to each other. Really listen. Okay, that's who you are. That's who you are. I'm getting that. That's hard for me to hear, but I'm getting it. It's who you are. Now, it's going to be a little hard for me, so work with me. Let me ask you some questions. Are you going to leave me if he has finds your G-spot better? No, I'm not going to leave you for that. Okay. That's good to know. Why wouldn't you leave me for that? Well, we're dear friends and we have kids together and you'll always be the father of my children. Okay, that's good to know. Once you start talking about these things, you put these emotional planks in place that are real, that are true. It's not a series of lies, like I'll stay with you forever because I said so in front of some people who gave us some dinnerware. It's a terrible reason to stay together, by the way. People, if you want to stay together because it feels stable and secure, then do so. But don't put a muzzle on it. Don't put a bit and a bridle on each other. Say, okay, what are the rules? You know what? Take 2 weeks off. Just go take 2 weeks off. We got the kids with your sister and brother, whatever. With your cousins. Just go take a week and a half and have a great time and tell me about what you want to tell me about and be happy. And then I'll do the same in 6 months or a month or something. I'm trying to encourage people to be realistic about maintaining long-term stabilizing relationships and building their tribe out instead of making it smaller and smaller, which is what the thems in charge want us to be smaller and smaller and smaller and more dependent on the cartel, the oligarchy, the Petroleum Institute, the Miley Cyrus vision, MTV, television, all the crap, the vaccine networks. I'm telling you to be more dependent on each other. Form a tribe. Let the people in who you care about and put jealousy to the side as much as you possibly can. And I guarantee you can put it aside more than you think you can just by talking about it and allowing it to pass. It's possible.
And I think it's interesting because when you and I first had this conversation again, and this is something you reiterated earlier, that like you were like, I'm not into swinging, and I'm not just talking about swinging. Like for you, if you know even if you have a few girlfriends, each one of those girls is stimulating to you on some level intellectually for some reason and emotionally. You feel a connection to them in some way, which I find when you said that, I was like, wow, that's interesting, because I know some guys can disassociate sex and love. And I found it interesting that that's not what, like, at face value, people might say, well, he's just saying go out and run around and have sex with everyone unprotected and bang whoever. And then you turn around and say, well, no, don't be stupid about it. Make sure you're doing things properly and you're not being an idiot. You don't want to get sick, and then you say, and I myself am not into swinging. And then you realize, okay, there's actually a deeper level to what he's saying. He's just saying that he can have that connection with multiple people instead of just one person. And then you're explaining, you get into the whole primal thing. So as an outside individual looking at it, I just wanted to break that down really quick.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I don't have the same thing with any two people. I have a best friend and we flirt, but we're not terribly sexual, and then I have a couple of close friends and there's flirtation, and I've had a couple of girlfriends, but every relationship is different, and every relationship brings different concepts, ideas, feelings, desires, dreams out of you. I had a girlfriend who wasn't really able to follow through. It was she was bound into something and couldn't quite figure out how to get out of it. But our little dreams together revolved around the fact we're both painters, we're both artists, and it revolved around art. That when you allow these little romances to happen, you find that they reach different parts of your soul. It's not about the penis and the vagina. That's just the surface. The reality is that your soul wants to bond with people in different ways. So I met somebody who I wanted to do our art projects with, and she was unable to sort of convince herself to convince the longer term thing that she was in that would be okay. She kind of lacked some courage, I think, which is, probably pretty normal. But that's what came out. I have another friend who's a very dear friend, and we haven't crossed those lines. But I wouldn't want to be without her in my life. She helps me do other projects, and it's not related to art and painting. Then I have another, my best friend is somebody that I do radio prep with and research with, and then I have a couple of close guy friends, and it's not, I'm not going to say it's not sexual in that sense, but we talk about sex and relationships, so it's psychologically beneficial. And then every once in a while, honestly, somebody comes through and it's just like, let's be sexual, it's fun, let's talk, let's fool around a little, let's have a great conversation. We get something out of it, it comes and it goes, but I don't go into rooms with people who I don't know and put my penis into them. That's called swinging, and I know that it works for some people. And you know what? They're going to be angry at me because they actually do know most of the people that they do this with. Because these are also kinds of long-term relationships. Swinging actually does mean that you know these people over time. For the most part, swinging communities know each other. So I take that back. I was wrong. So even swingers tend to know each other. It's just not quite my scene. It's just not quite my scene. But it works for a lot of people.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I don't think there's one umbrella-sized thing, but I think if everybody acknowledges the reality of the situation and then understands why they have these urges or whatever, then whether they choose to repress those urges or whether they choose to fully engage them, however they fully engage them, that's their choice. But I just think that they should be honest with themselves about it. Because, again, if you're not, then you're repressing who you really are. And if you're repressing yourself on that level, chances are that you're repressing yourself on a ton of other levels. Liam, we got less than a minute left. I want you to plug your book again, both the current one and the one that's coming out.
Well, the book that's coming out, I won't give the title away. It'll be 2 months away. So stay tuned to my website, liamscheff.com, to Popeye's show, to Truth Frequency Radio, to UCY TV, which I do radio on, to Sean McGuire's show Out of the Bag. Anyway, wherever there's the internet, hopefully you'll hear about it. My book is is official stories. Official stories exist to protect officials. Chapter 6 is all about the fake sexual mind control put forward by the New Vatican, the NIH.
Liam, we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming on again, brother. As always, it is a intellectually inspiring broadcast. I like to call it mental candy. Ladies and gentlemen, just want you to think. Use your brains, because the people that are controlling things certainly don't want you to. I love you all. I'll see you all again next week, Tuesday. We are out of here.